Ladies and gentlemen, a very good morning to you. I was listening to two people talking outside just a few moments ago, and one man whispered to the other, "Almost over." I wasn't sure whether he was referring to my professional career or the work of the forum, but he certainly wasn't referring to the subject of unending debate that we're looking at this morning, which is the compatibility of Islam with democracy. For one thing, whose Islam? Islam has been interpreted and reinterpreted for centuries, and it's still going on. Do we talk about the Islam of Saudi Arabia or Turkey, of Jordan or Iran, of the many millions of Muslims in Indonesia or India? The Islam of the Shia or Sunni sects, of the fundamentalists or secularists, or the Islam of Al-Qaeda. All different interpretations whose complexities are often lost on the West. Does Islam rule out one man, one vote, or does it encourage it? How far is it used as a cover by anti-democratic regimes to maintain control and stifle dissent? Just some of the issues I hope we'll be touching on this morning. Well, our guests come from very different backgrounds. Amr Moussa on the far right is former Egyptian foreign minister and now chairman of the Arab League and a long-time sparring partner of mine. And Professor Samuel Huntington, author of The Clash of Civilizations and the Remaking of World Order, and now chairman of the Harvard Academy for International and Area Studies. Gentlemen, welcome to both of you. I'm going to ask, if I may, Samuel Huntington, first of all, to tell us where he's coming from on this issue. Professor.
Okay, well, thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, and I know our time is very limited, so I will try to be brief. It seems to me the first thing we have to do is to, since the topic of this is Islam and democracy, is to define our terms. I will not try to define Islam. I will let Mr. Moussa do that. But I will try to define democracy. I think most of us would consider a government democratic to the extent that its most powerful decision makers are selected through regular elections in which there is open and free competition between political parties, where the candidates can campaign for votes freely, where the bulk of the population can vote, and in which those votes are fairly counted, and the winners are able to assume control of government. Now, democracy, modern democracy, in this sense, originated in Western Europe, and almost all Western societies are democratic. Clearly, however, democracy is not limited to Western societies. For many years, we've had non-Western societies, such as India, Israel, or Japan, just as examples, that have functioned very effectively as democracy. In addition, beginning in 1975, a wave of transitions to democracy occurred throughout the world, in Southern Europe, Latin America, Eastern Europe, Asia, and to a somewhat more limited extent in Africa. Just to cite the figures, in 1974, somewhat less than 40% of the countries in the world had what could be called democratic governments. There are 41 democracies out of 150 states. Now there are 121 democracies out of 193 states. 60% of the countries in the world are democratic. There is an exception to this widespread trend towards democracy that many people like to point to, or I should say an apparent exception, and that is in the Muslim world and more specifically in the Arab world. Now, some people argue that Islam is inherently incompatible with democracy. I do not think that is the case at all. Islam, like any other complex set of ideas and beliefs, can be used either to support democratic development or authoritarian rule. And certainly that has been the case with all the other religions in the world, including Protestantism and Catholicism. And in Islam, it seems to me, there are many very democratic components, including the egalitarianism that is central to Islam. There are also some aspects of Islam that can cause problems, such as the tendency to merge religion and politics and think in terms of a single political religious community. But I don't think there's anything inherently hostile to the democratic development in Islam. In addition, of course, we do have Muslim countries which have made progress and have been democracies. Turkey, for a number of years, Indonesia and Bangladesh are functioning democracies. Iran has a fascinating effort to combine two principles of government and legitimacy, electoral legitimacy on the one hand and religious legitimacy on the other. In addition, we've seen that there's been some movement towards democracy in places like Bahrain and Qatar. And of course, we've had efforts to install democracy in a country like Algeria 10 years ago, where they held elections, which were then, however, canceled and suspended by the military intervention, which I think was something that the West allowed, and indeed the United States and France quietly encouraged, and I think that was a horrible mistake on the part of the United States and France, because it led to a civil war in which over 100,000 people were killed. It was much better to have let the FIS come to power in Algeria. Now, finally, I would just say that I think while democracy has made all this progress in the world, and hopefully will make more, particularly in the Arab world, and while democracy, hence, is the dominant form of government today, I think it is necessary to recognize that no form of government necessarily fits everywhere. President Musharraf, a couple of days ago here, said that democracy had to be adapted in different environments. And I think we have to expect that the democracy will take different forms in different cultures, and that the peculiarly Western form of democracy may be something that is only suitable for the West.
Just before I ask Amr Moussa to respond to that, is the Bush administration, do you think, aware of those complexities that you've outlined?
No.
Amr Moussa.
Thank you, Tim. In fact, I feel that Professor Huntington had said it all, so I agree with him. And,
but you're not going to be lost for words.
First of all, I want to discuss parts of your introductory remarks about Islam and your question whether this is the Islam of the Shia or of the Sunnah, of the Qaeda, of Turkey or of Egypt or of Malaysia. I believe the question is wrong. Islam is a religion for all of us who believe in Islam. There are those who are true believers, positive people, adding to the religion, servicing their societies, and there are people who are bad people that are giving Islam a hard time, especially at this juncture. But this applies to all other religions too. There are good Christians, very good Christians, and bad ones. We have seen them in the violent organizations that have been known in Europe 2 or 3 decades ago, now in some parts of Latin America, sowing havoc in their own societies, against their governments, regardless of the presence or non-presence of democracy in some Latin American countries. So I would say that Islam, like all other religions, is meant to organize people's life. It has its spiritual side, the relations between human being and God, but also certain rules and obligations that helps people and human beings go about their lives. This is the nature, the definition of a religion, be it Islam, Christianity, Judaism, Buddhism, or Hinduism, or whatever. At the same time, on the other hand, democracy is a system of government that has been proven effective and better than any other system. And the goal of democracy is also to bring happiness and promote interests of people. So religions, in their final product or final goal, is to bring happiness to people. Systems of government are supposed to lead us to the same goal. So inherently, there is no contradiction between any religion and any system of government, provided that it is a system of government that is accepted by its people. Professor Huntington said 2 or 3 important things that I wish to underline. First one, his observation that there is nothing inherently hostile, nothing in Islam that is inherently hostile to democracy. This is a very important observation, which I and many others, many other Muslims believe in. And this is also a fact. It is the result of a study or readings of a historian like Dr. Huntington. And it is very normal. Why should it be? Why should it be? And where is the logic here? Over which a conclusion is being built that Islam is against democracy, is incompatible with democracy, except for certain writers that are not above suspicion. The other point he mentioned, Professor Huntington mentioned, is about democracy that is spreading around. And I believe the Arab societies and Muslim societies are moving steadily towards establishing a democratic system or democracy. Democracy is a process. It is not just a decision to be taken from above. It is a process that people should participate in, should build. If you have a deeper look at the developments in many Muslim societies, Arab and non-Arab, you will see that civil society is growing. In the Arab world, over 100,000 NGOs now are working. The press, the debates about the future of our society. I am one of those who believe, I'm not in the minority, I don't believe I am in the minority. I believe that we'll have to move on. We'll have to change. This is the 21st century, and we have to link up with this, the new world. And globalization is not a Christian call. Globalization is for all of us. Muslims, Christians, Jews, you name it. Globalization is the name of the game. And it cannot be effective if we will introduce this exclusionism that certain writers are trying to effect by attacking Islam unjustly, unfairly. And if, as President Bush and many other American high officials have praised steps taken towards democracy in Morocco, in Jordan, in Egypt, in other Arab countries, does that mean automatically that as they move ahead towards democracy, they move away from Islam? This is not the case. We will continue to be Muslims, continue to believe in that great faith. We will reject, and we do reject, all calls, as some European high official said after 9/11, that it took us 70 years to defeat communism. Now, our campaign to defeat Islam has started. He is absolutely, in my opinion, totally ignorant. The Islam, if it is a battle against Islam, campaign against Islam, it would take perhaps a millennium. And I don't think Islam will be defeated. So the best thing is that we work together, understand what Islam is all about, as we should understand what Christianity is all about, or what Judaism is all about. Those are 3 highly respected religions. And we should not at all foment or push towards battles, confrontation, as the professor has coined this clash of civilization, which will eat us all. We are much better off without this clash.
Can I ask anybody in the audience to put up their hands? They have something to say. Gentleman there, please.
You were talking about, thank you, democracy, and I had the impression that you were referring to the way that a government is elected. But I think that democracy in the Western world has made progress only from the moment that we got a separation between state and church, and that is what is still failing in the Islamic world. It's not a matter of religions being better adapted to democracy or not, but I think that we should get a separation between churches and states.
Ahmed Musa, I mean, you think there's a case for reforming Islam, don't you?
Well, okay, let me answer the gentleman. We are not ruled from mosques in our societies, my friend. We have governments and we have laws. For example, the laws in Egypt, they are built on the French code of law and also the principles of the Sharia of Islam. But we're not ruled by a church or a mosque that decides for us what to do. I believe there is a lot of distortion that has been introduced into the minds of many people in the West about Islam. The separation of the government and religion is there. I don't have to speak about my country or the Arab countries. Take Malaysia, for example, which the professor did not include in the countries, Muslim countries that have introduced a full system of democracy and proved to be highly successful economically, socially, and politically. Therefore, the notion that the separation of religion and government is being followed in Europe but not being followed in Muslim countries is not totally correct. One. Two, I must not say that we are perfect in our system of government. We need a lot of reform. And as I said moments ago, we cannot continue as we are. We'll have to move ahead. Reform is needed. Change is needed. And we were talking about that, about the change, about reform, as I trust all societies are doing. And I must say here that many countries are following this movement towards the future. Saudi Arabia is doing that. Many other Arab countries are doing that. But then the attacks with insults, like some books that came out recently, calling them evil, etc. This is a different agenda, of course, but a fair look into the movement, the dynamics that are playing an important role now in the Muslim societies would say, oh my God, those people are serious. And they reform, they change, are words that are being acceptable by us. What tarnished this notion or those expressions to a certain extent was those calls that we are coming to change you, we are coming to teach you how to develop. This is something that nobody would accept. But we will continue to change our societies, to reform our societies, because we believe reform is the name of the game, not only for us in Muslim nations, but in all third world countries, Christian, Muslims, or whatever.
Why don't we see any timetables for reforms? Why don't we see any specific commitments tied to a single timetable?
Well,
that would be a mark of being serious, wouldn't it?
Yeah, but the question of timetable, that you should do that in 2 years or 3 years, but I believe in the shortest possible period of time.
The talking has gone on far longer than 2 or 3 years.
Excuse me?
The talking about reform has gone on far longer than 2 or 3 years.
Let it take 5 years or 10 years, as long as you are on the right path towards reform, economic, social, and you name it. This should be pursued and should be encouraged.
Gentleman over there.
Faisal Abdul Raouf from New York, author of an upcoming book, which, pardon my making a plug for it, but which addresses some of these issues. Two comments I'd like to make. One about the separation of church and state as understood in the Islamic point, and as Amr Musa pointed out, there's a difference between separation of church and state and separation of religion and state as seen within the Muslim point of view. The second point that I'd like to make, which really undergirds the basis of the philosophical basis of this idea of Islam and democracy, is that the basis of the American Declaration of Independence is the self-evident truth that we have unalienable rights to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. The Sharia, Islamic law, has as its fundamental objectives what is called maqasid of Sharia in Islamic law, is the pursuit and protection of 5 objectives: life, mind, which can be considered to be liberty, protection of property, family, and religious freedoms. And therefore one can see in this link a powerful relationship, but the belief which undergirds the American Declaration of Independence is itself a religion, or a belief system which writers like Jabr 50 years ago had called the overarching religion or belief under which all religions can live freely. It is this system which I believe, or these linkages, which provide the important philosophical powerful links that will undergird the development of a philosophical substructure to the idea of Islam and democracy. Thank you.
Professor, do you want to comment on that?
Well, perhaps briefly, I think you suggest the distinction between the state and church is not the same as the one between religion and community, and I think that's a very important point. And I think Mr. Musa very effectively explained why the issue of separation in church and state was really not a central one in Islamic countries. I wonder, however, about this question of religion and community, and it's my very limited knowledge of Islam. It seems to me that there is the assumption that the political community is also a religious community. The religious community is also the political community. And if that is the case, then it seems to me there may be some problems with getting democracy to function. One other practical issue I might just seize upon, since you quoted the Declaration of Independence. The slogan of the Americans in their struggle for independence against Britain was no taxation without representation. I think that also works in reverse. There's no representation without taxation. And I think one of the problems in some Arab countries is that there is virtually no taxation because the governments are so rich with oil that they are able to offer all sorts of benefits, free health care, free education, support of all sorts of things to their publics without having to tax them.
Why do you call that a problem, Professor?
Well, because I think it does have this negative effect.
They have the money and they are serving their community and they're
they're doing very good things, but
so?
but I think there many social theorists have developed what they in the past decade what they call the resource curse. That having resources like that, which bring in this flood of money, means that the government has no incentive to and no need to bring the public into participation.
Is it part of democracy, Professor? I'm sorry, is it part of the democratic system that we will have to apply? Is to implement the American Declaration of Independence?
No. Well, all I'm saying is that point I'm making is that if you look at the history of the development of democracy, and certainly in most Western countries, governments wanted to, kings wanted to get tax money to do what they wanted to do. In order to do that, they had to allow for the participation of people in government. And that is the reason why there is this connection between taxation and representation. But if there's no need to tax, there's also no need, and you can, at least it becomes much more difficult to move in a democratic direction. And I think that is one of the problems, which is, as I has afflicted many of the Arab countries, obviously not all of them, because some of them are very poor.
Amr Musa, the point is here that people in the Arab countries would like to find out what their governments have been doing with the money, isn't it?
Look, look, this is...
That's one of the reasons.
No, that's not one
They
of
would
the
like some accountability and some openness in government,
Tim,
and indeed that's what the Arab Business Council has been calling for here, as you well know.
Tim, all people in all societies would like to know where the money of their community or their society goes. Professor said that there are a lot of services and the infrastructure has been built in the oil-rich countries. So people see for themselves that schools are being built, hospitals have become excellent, roads, infrastructure, you name it.
Do they know how much money the princes have taken in various countries?
Perhaps the princes, I have never been a prince, I don't know how to pay, to spend that money. But I'm talking about the society and the people only. The society and the people, when they see that their governments are really working and building electricity, etc. Not only in the oil-rich, but in other countries, also in Egypt, for example. We see a lot of progress with electricity all over the country. 99% of the country is being covered. Jordan, the same. Syria, and then those links, the electricity grids link between Egypt, Jordan, Syria, Lebanon, Egypt, Libya, Tunis, Algeria. This is something that money is being spent in the right. That there is corruption, of course, this is a different story. We'll have to, part of the reform, we'll have to stop corruption wherever it occurs.
Okay, Dr. Badawi.
Well, I just would like to begin by suggesting that Professor Huntington could include in his definition of democracy the ability of a society to dismiss, not just to elect, but to dismiss incompetent ruler. And I mentioned
that comes in the next election.
The Californian. You think so? The Californian example, I think, is a marvelous one to recall the incompetent ruler. I just would like to comment, and I thoroughly agree with you that Islam is not a particularly, you're not opposed to democracy. We had a debate here as well. I don't think whether Tim attended it. God in politics. And the myth that Islam is somehow a particular case where religion and politics are mixed up. In reality, religion and politics are never separated in the West either. And if you listen to President Bush talking, may God continue to bless the Americans by giving them another 4 years.
Yes, indeed.
So I think in this respect, we really have to remove that myth altogether. Islam does not need that reform movement that people always claim or say about in the West. Another thing which really I think the professor torpedoed as well, there was the idea that the Middle East is a particular case, unsuited for democracy. You find that in all political science books in the West, or almost all of them. And I think I'm very happy that he says otherwise. Let me say something about democracy and Islam. Islam and democracy do not conflict at all. What happens, we have dictatorship in our societies, but this has been in the West as well. Democracy is still a tender plant, even in the West. Look.
So it's just some Arab states that have a problem with it?
Let me just say, what happened when a society feels endangered and beleaguered? It reacts very badly. I mean, look at what happened now under terrorism. What happened in America? How much deficit in your rights, of democratic rights, of the professor can tell you. You, Tim, too. you have certain deficit in your rights in Britain. And this is because there is a threat. And what happened, most of the Muslim countries, and the Arab countries in particular, feel beleaguered. And that's why, you know, we had a slogan at one time, no voice should drown the voice of the battle. We're fighting a battle for independence. Now, what we need is assurance. What we need in the Arab world is assurance and a sense of security. We can deal with our rulers, I can assure you. We can deal with them. And we can see that our freedom are gained just in the way that it was gained in Europe. Now, the movement in Bahrain, in Qatar, in Oman, you didn't mention, and of course in Malaysia, these are movements which are healthy. And in Egypt, there will be a movement. In due course, some of the problems in our society is that they say, well, the society, if you allow for democracy, you have the extremists. They allowed democracy in Turkey, the extremists came to power, and what happened when they came to power? They're no longer extremists. And that is very important.
Let me get Musa to respond, because we're running out. We only have 7 or 8 minutes left, and a lot of people.
What would you, Professor Huntington, advise the American government, which really is now deciding the destiny of everybody, including the Arab world? What would you advise the Americans to do to enhance democracy, other than lecturing the rulers, to enhance democracy in the real sense for the Middle East?
Very briefly, please, Professor.
Well, I think, first of all, democracy has to grow in its own soil. Maybe the American government can provide a little water to sprinkle on this fragile plant in some societies to help it to grow, but I don't think the American government can do much more than that. It's whether the plant develops will depend upon the soil and the environment in that particular part of the world.
Thank you. I will refer you to some historical facts. Democracy in the Middle East started in the mid-19th century in Egypt. 1870, 1880, there was a parliament and the elected went on until the constitution in the 20s. The governments were rotating. Elections were not that perfect, but they were rotating. Up until, and I believe that the same in Syria and in other Arab countries, until the era of military coup d'etat came. And you know who was behind this movement or this new development at that time? Most of them, I don't want to generalize, but most of them were against this process, and the process stopped. So it was not Islam that stopped democracy, but politics and the competition, international competition by incoming empires and outgoing empires in the 40s. That has played havoc with the democratic system in the Arab world. But again, now, and of course, one has to in such an audience, highly knowledgeable, we shouldn't underestimate the degree of influence of the Soviet Union in its war, Cold War with the United States. Who wins what and how many countries would be brought to this camp against the other camp, and then helped by certain political problems in regions. So I want to dispel this notion that it was Islam that has stopped. No, in the 19th century, where many countries, including European countries and in America, I believe, were not as knowledgeable with the world, as active in the world and in the development of society as Egypt, for example, was, or Lebanon for that matter, and other countries, including Syria and Iraq, who were in the 30s and early 40s parliamentary systems.
Gentleman in the front row. Several gentlemen in the front row.
As a rabbi representing progressive Jewish communities in Europe, I'm extremely happy at the process that we can take part in here in the World Economic Forum of the C100, of the dialogue between the West and Islam, to take away some of the misconceptions. And one of them, you explained, that there is a contradiction between Islam and democracy. As far as religion is concerned, thank God there are more roads to the truth. It's not a clash of religions. There is a tremendous potential of giving each other strength. And so I have a utopian. A utopian is that in the discussion whether there should be a separation of church or state or synagogue state, is also in Israel. We are debating whether there could be a separation, how we could, as religion, maybe more effective force for a just society together. So one day, the quest for this justice should be strengthened in the same Middle East, that we would be able not to have the clash between us, but the true essence of religion, of being blessed by each other's presence, and then support this democratic process in the freedom, allowing also the Islamic world to reach it.
The other gentleman there.
My name is Muzammil Siddiqui from the Islamic Society of Orange County in California. I think this point was very well presented by Dr. Musa, that we are not ruled by the mosques. So Islamic State is not a theocratic state. It is the state of laws. Some of those laws are divine laws, and some laws are made by the human beings. Very often there is also another misconception that is the Sharia is going to rule. And people think that Sharia is a very rigid system. Sharia has details in the matter that do not change, such as prayers, fasting, Hajj, pilgrimage. But Sharia is very flexible. Sharia is very open. It gives just broad principles in the matters of economy, in the matters of politics. So Islamic State can be a democratic state, should be a democratic state, but it's not necessarily in the same pattern as the other states are, because even in democracies, such as British democracy, US democracy, French democracy, South African democracy, even when it was ruled by the apartheid government, they used to call it democratic state. And the communist government, they used to call themselves democratic. There are various kinds of democracies, but Islamic democracy will be Islamic democracy.
But is the problem the lack of a central authority in Islam? Is that a problem?
I'm sorry?
The lack of a central authority in Islam.
Central authority is the authority of the Sharia, and Sharia should be interpreted by the people.
But the laws are very different in Islamic countries. They don't all have the same law. Laws are different.
No, that's not true. No, let them explain.
This is the way how people are going to evolve. I mean, there are rules, people are going to develop it. There is a ijma, concept of ijma, consensus, has to be developed by the discussions. And people have to discuss that. Of course, more knowledgeable people will have more to say in this matter. But there is no group as such, a clerical group that is going to determine everything.
All right, gentleman next to you really has been trying for a long time.
Munir Anisi, Bishop of the Episcopal Anglican Church in Egypt and North Africa. I am a Christian living among Muslims. I cannot say in an Islamic state because our state of Egypt is secular. It's not run by Muslims or run from Al-Azhar or the mosques, as Secretary General said. I want to say that we are in the right track in the process towards democracy. And for me, I think democracy is the right and the freedom to express. And we in the church in Egypt, we have a publishing house. And now we publish books with complete freedom. We get the international coding in minutes. This was not the case 20, 30 years ago. In minutes, we get the freedom to publish our Christian books. But I want also to say that many times when people in the West speak about Islam, they have Taliban picture in their mind, which is not the case at all. Taliban is a minority, like many Christian minorities who are very extreme and extremist in their thinking. Here in Davos, I have met people who think that the World Economic Forum and globalization is an act of Satan. And these are Christians. They think that it's an act of Satan to bring the whole world together so that Satan would rule this world. And we cannot say this is the universal view of Christians at all.
Ladies and gentlemen, we're on a very tight schedule, and we have to wrap it up there because our panelists have to leave. Thank you all very much. I know it could have gone on much longer, but thank you for your participation. Thank you.